Hello, how are you? What's going on? How's life under COVID-19? I know, some of us are already tired being locked in our house for almost all the time. That's why I'm presenting this video to offer something that might be useful to you, to your family, in riding over these trying times. In this video, I'm going to present something about fermentation. Now, fermentation can be quite daunting when you hear it. It can sound technical, but it is not. No, it is not. Especially for us, Filipinos. Fermentation is actually a technology that Filipinos are good at. We have tinabal, we have ginamos, we have bagoong na hipon, bagoong na isda, we have atsara. Okay? These are just some of the Filipino fermented products that are traditionally made not by big factories, not by costly chemical processes, okay? But they are made by cottage industries manned by everyday regular Filipinos using only the most basic of tools. Now, about these Filipino fermented products, there are actually at least 29 of them that are produced by different regions of the country. And nowhere in the list of Filipino fermented products is sauerkraut found. Now, that's actually surprising, and I'm going to emphasize that. Okay, we do not produce sauerkraut. Okay? So that thought is surprising to me. The thought that Filipinos who are very fond of fermented products do not make sauerkraut, when in fact it is one of the easiest, if not the easiest, the most basic of all fermented products that anybody and anyone can make. So this video is about showing you, proving to you that you can actually make sauerkraut right now in your home using only the most basic of tools and utensils that you have in your kitchen. Do you know that sauerkraut is actually a German word for fermented cabbage? It is. Now, nowadays we usually link sauerkraut with European cuisines, but it's actually Asian in origin. The earliest record of sauerkraut dates it as far as the 4th century BC in China. It only found its way into Europe by the invasions of the Mongolian warlord Genghis Khan. Sauerkraut is actually an acquired taste for us Filipinos. Of course, we're not used to it. But once you acclimate to its taste, then it's a whole new eating experience. Because sauerkraut is great as a side dish, as a garnish, and as a sandwich layer. So let me just put it this way. Sauerkraut is delicious, it makes other foods delicious, and it's nutritious. If you eat sauerkraut, you will get not only vitamins A, B, and C, you will also get vitamin K2, which is important for the body because it helps in the absorption of calcium by the bones. So sauerkraut is good for our bones, for the skeletal system. Sauerkraut is also good when it comes to the absorption of iron because it provides us with lactic acid. And sauerkraut is also good, it's beneficial for the immune system Because as we all know, 70% of the immune system is actually in our gut. And sauerkrauts improve the microflora of our gut, just like yogurts. Now, sauerkraut is not only good for the immune system, it's not only good for the skeletal system, it's also very helpful when it comes to lowering the risk of acquiring some diseases, such as cancer. And as a bonus, sauerkraut can actually help you lose weight. Okay, so let's make our sauerkraut. As promised, we're only going to use ingredients and materials found in our kitchen. Let's start with the ingredients first. When it comes to sauerkraut, you will only need 2. That's right, only 2 ingredients. 1 head of cabbage, in this case, but you can actually use as many heads of cabbage as you want, and salt. Okay, so the amount of salt that we're going to need in the fermentation process is 2% of the weight of the cabbage. Okay, and that's it. Only salt and cabbage when it comes to sauerkraut. Now, in some cases, they like to put other vegetables. Yes, you can do that. You can put lemon, you can put garlic, you can actually put ginger and carrots. But you must remember that these additives must only be up to 20% of the weight of the whole vegetables in the fermentation process. Okay? 75%, at least 75% of that weight must be cabbage. Because the magic when it comes to sauerkraut fermentation is in the cabbage, specifically in its leaves. Okay? So the bacterial population that we're going to need for the fermentation to happen, it's in the leaves of the cabbage. So again, salt, cabbage. Now, for the materials, here are the utensils we're going to use. Chopping knife, chopping board. We're going to chop this cabbage into strips. Tupperware. This is where we'll mix the salt and the cabbage. Jar. We're going to use this jar as a fermenting vat. But if you have other bottles, bigger bottles in your home, that would be great. Okay? I only have this, and it's alright. You'll also be needing this empty ketchup bottle. This empty ketchup bottle will serve as a pressure and as a weight during the fermentation. Soup bowl. This soup bowl will contain the harvested sauerkraut after the fermentation. Then you'll be needing this rod in order to reach the sauerkraut inside the bottle. And of course, you'll be needing these forks right here to harvest the sauerkraut. And you'll need this thin plastic, circular plastic plate. Okay? This will actually serve as a sealant in order to keep all of the cabbage below the brine. And you'll be needing a plastic bag, and in this case a styrofoam bag. This will go over the jar, and its importance is actually in keeping the condition inside the jar anoxic or anaerobic. And of course, the rubber band to keep the jar in place. Okay? So, again, here are the materials that you're going to need. Cabbage, salt, chopping knife, chopping board, container, Tupperware, soup bowl, plastic plate. Okay, if you don't have plastic plate, maybe you can use smaller saucers, and if your vats are bigger, you can even use plates, actual plates. This rod, forks, ketchup bottle, styrofoam bag or plastic bag and jar. And that's it. So the question now is, how do we make the sauerkraut? Now, the sauerkraut making process is comprised of 4 easy steps. The first one is called cutting. Now, in this step, you're going to slice your cabbage into thin strips. Okay? So the way I do it is, first I slice the cabbage into half, then into quarters, then I remove the hard cores found inside the cabbage quarters, then I'm going to slice the quarters into thin strips. And that's it. Okay? Now, the second stage is what we call as salting. Now, in salting, we're going to add salt into our cabbage strips. Okay? Just remember that the amount of salt we're going to put in the cabbage strip is equivalent to 2% of the weight of the cabbage strip. Okay? Now, number 3, or step 3. Step 3 is what we call as pounding. So, remember, in step 1 and step 2, you have prepared your cabbage, you have added the salt, and in step 3, you're going to crush, okay? Crush and pound your cabbage strips with the salt. Now, this process is important in order for the water, for the juice, for the extract from the cabbage to come out. Okay? Now, it is important that this fluid must come out because it contains the carbohydrates that will be reacted by the bacteria, by the lactic acid bacteria. At the same time, it will also be necessary in ensuring the anaerobic condition required by the lactic acid bacteria. The fourth stage is the stage or the step that requires the least participation of people. So in this stage, I would like to think of just letting the lactic acid bacteria do their stuff. Okay? Now, what are these lactic acid bacteria? Now, they will come in succession. Okay? The first group of bacteria would be the Leuconostoc mesenteroides group. Okay? Now, the Leuconostoc mesenteroides group will only come in if the condition is anaerobic. That is why it's important that after stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, okay, we're going to close our fermentation vat or fermentation jar as tightly as possible in order for air to be prevented from getting into our container. Okay, so once the Leuconostoc mesenteroides are activated, they will act on the carbohydrates that are in the brine, and this reaction, okay, will produce lactic acid and carbon dioxide. Now, the carbon dioxide will slowly replace the oxygen inside the fermentation jar, and the Leuconostoc mesenteroides group will continue with their activity until the lactic acid level inside the jar reaches 2.5 to 0.3%. Okay, at that level, the Leuconostoc group will die. Now, after the die-off of the first group, the second group will come in. Now, this would be your Lactobacillus plantarum and Lactobacillus cucumeris. Now, these two lactic acid bacteria will again do the same activities as the Leuconostoc group. So they will consume the carbohydrates left by the first group. They will produce carbon dioxide and they will produce lactic acid, and they will continue on doing this until the lactic acid level reaches 1.5 to 2%. Okay, and again they will die. Now, what we must remember about these two population of bacteria is that they're very sensitive to temperature and they're also sensitive to the salt level. That is why we need to really observe the 2% rule when it comes to the salt that we're going to add in this process. And for the temperature, make sure also to not put the fermentation jar directly under the sun or inside the refrigerator. Okay? Just below the room temperature. That's what they want. Okay? Now, after the die-off of the second group, the last group of bacteria, the Lactobacillus brevis, will come in. Now, again, with the consumption of carbohydrates, again, the release of carbon dioxide, again, with the production of lactic acid, and the Lactobacillus brevis will continue their activity until the lactic acid level inside the fermentation mixture reaches 3%. Okay, at that level or beyond that level, your Lactobacillus brevis group, they will die. Okay, so the time for the harvesting of the sauerkraut will be signaled by the absence of bubbles in the fermentation mixture. Of course, because all of the bacteria have already died and no more carbon dioxide are released. So when you see that there are no more bubbles forming in your mixture, then that's the right time to harvest your sauerkraut. As to the participation of people during this stage, all that we have to do is from time to time open the jar to allow the carbon dioxide to release from the jar, to avoid their building up inside the jar. And at the same time, to also check on what is happening inside the jar. Okay, so if you see scums developing on the surface of the brine, then make sure to remove them. Okay, now these scums or yeast, they're actually a normal occurrence in the fermentation of sauerkraut. Okay, so if you see them, don't panic, just remove them, and we go on with the fermentation process. Okay, so first chop the cabbage into half and into quarters like that. That sweet smell of cabbage. Okay, remove the cores of our cabbage quarters. We have been eating them. After that, we cut them into strips. Okay. And we put these strips in our Tupperware. We have already pre-weighted our Tupperware because we're going to weigh our cabbage to get the 2% of that weight, so that we will know how much salt to put in our fermented cabbage. Okay, so we already measured the weight of our cabbage strip. It is 57 grams together with our Tupperware. The Tupperware is 10 grams. So deduct 10 from 57, that is 47 grams. We have 47 grams of cabbage strips right here. 2% of 47 grams, that would be 0.94 gram. So 0.94 gram, that would be the weight of the salt. Okay, so we have our salt right here, 0.94 gram, and we will be distributing this salt in our cabbage strip. Okay. Okay. that juice coming off of a cabbage strip. Now this juice is rich in carbohydrates, and this will be broken down by our bacteria. Okay, it will fuel the activity. Okay, so now we have the cabbage inside the glass jar together with the brine. What we're going to do now is we're going to use this empty ketchup bottle and press the mixture down. In that way, the brine will reach above the cabbage, thus ensuring an anoxic or anaerobic condition for the lactic acid bacteria. Now that the cabbage is submerged below the brine, we're going to put the sealant. Now this sealant will serve to push all of the cabbage residues below the brine. That way. And we're going to use the empty ketchup bottle as a way to push all of those cabbage below the brine. And after that, we're going to put the lid, twist it, and just to ensure that no air, no oxygen can get into our mixture to disrupt the fermentation process, we're going to use this styrofoam membrane, cover the opening, and secure it with a rubber band. Okay? Now, after that, we're going to find a place to store this mixture, this glass jar with our cabbage, because it needs a temperature below the room temperature. So probably I'm going to put this under the sink. So this is now the sauerkraut jar after a day of fermentation. So as you can see, there are gases bubbling on the surface of the brine. So what we're going to do now is to allow the gases trapped in this portion right here to exit the jar. Okay, so except for the smell of the fermenting cabbage, there are no rancid smells coming out of the jar. So the fermentation is going on as planned. This is now what our jar of sauerkraut, fermenting sauerkraut, looks like. Except for the fermenting cabbage smell, I smell no other rancid odor coming out of the jar. So, as you can see, I placed a sandbag, a plastic bag, over the styrofoam membrane, just to ensure that no oxygen gets into the jar. And it's a good thing also that I placed, I've secured these membranes and bag with a rubber band, because it really prevents the ants from getting into the jar. So this is now the inside of our jar, and as you can see, no scums have formed on our liquid, and the smell is also not pungent, and as you can see, the brine above our fermenting cabbage is clear. There are no scums found floating on it except for gases or bubbles. Let's have another look-see at what is happening inside our fermentation jar. And you might be wondering why I'm holding this. This is actually a scooping ladle, specifically made for this process. And the reason why I'm holding this because I'm seeing some white substance on top of our brine. Now this white substance, this is what we call as scum. This is something that I expect to happen in our fermentation. This is something that usually happens when we ferment vegetables, and it's alright, it's okay, okay? So no need to panic, no need to throw away all of this setup, okay? All we have to do is scoop out that white substance using this this ladle right here, because if we don't, it will affect the taste of our cabbage, of our sauerkraut, okay? So let's do that. So when we remove the jar, the weight I mean, so it actually took out most of the white substance. Here's that. So what we did earlier was just to remove some of the remaining scum that was on the edge of the periphery of the brine, and I think we have done that. Okay, so remove that. So as you can see now, the brine is plain, no more white stuff there, and we're going to wash off this white substance from our weight and return the weight into our jar, and we'll proceed with the fermentation process. Hooray! It's been 7 days now since we started our fermentation, and we'll harvest the sauerkraut in this jar. So first, let us smell the insides of the jar, and from that smell there is this sweet vinegary odor, and I think that's the smell that we're looking for. Okay, so we'll just get the sealant, and after that we're going to get the sauerkraut itself. Okay, so first the sealant. So we're taking out the sealant now. Place it here, and it's time to get the sauerkraut. Okay, but first let's put it on a plate so we can have a taste test. Okay?
Oh, sipag.
Okay, so we now have our sauerkraut here, and let's have a taste test. The cabbage is crunchy, and the taste is like sour, but pleasant sour. Okay, so I think we have here a very good sauerkraut. So it's now time to put our product in this jar and put it in the refrigerator. So see you after putting it in the jar. Okay? Okay, so we now have our sauerkraut in the bottle, and I'm so happy with what we have done. I'm so happy with this sauerkraut. You know, the taste is good, it's excellent, it's what I expected, and the process is so simple and easy. So I hope you have learned many things about making sauerkraut in this video, and I hope you will be encouraged to make sauerkraut in your own home. Okay? See you soon.